First of all, I would like to pay my high respect to the lecturer. My name is Yang Leanghuy. Today, I'm going to do the presentation for my final examination about ENG321, which is about the introduction to linguistics. So this is my content. So I have, first of all, I'm going to start with introduction, the nature of communication, the phonological component, phonetic, and the phonological component, which is about the um, phonology. And four, I'm going to talk about the morphological component. Then I'm going to talk about the syntax. Next, I'm going to talk about the semantic and pragmatic. And number seven, I'm going to talk about social linguistic and linguistic anthropology. Number eight, I'm going to talk about language acquisition. And the last one, it is about sign language. So we move on to the first one, which is about the nature of communication. So what is communication? Actually, communication is the effect between behavior and behavior of other by transmission of information. And in commit, so if we talk about the in communication, it is about the transmission of information. In communication, a receiver must detect the message that was sent by the sender, and the message that produced is in a code. So by commanding the word and rule, there is another term called language. So I mean that language, it is the combination between um, word and rules. In communication, the sender encode the message and mean that they put the message into code. And after that, the receiver decode the message by reacting the send message. So if you talk about the communication, I mean that you have two people. So one is the sender and one is the receiver. So the sender here, they send the message by encoding the message. I mean that they put message into code. And after that, the one that is saved the message which we call the receiver, they read, they decode the message by react to the message or giving any reaction to the message. So to acquire a language, it involves the phonological system, lexicon, morphological rules, syntax, and semantic. So there's a number of channels for to form communication, like we have verbal communication as well as non-verbal communication. Um, we also learn about non-human communication. So non-human communication is in large part stimulus bound, and a signal is emitted by virtue of exposure to some stimulus. Human language is a stimulus-free, I'm sorry. We respond to a mental categorization of the world. The only factor limiting what we can communicate about is the capability of mind. Although the external environment may be the basis for some of this categorization, the different humans will develop their own reality on the basis of their cultural value or and knowledge. And there is basically only one way to behave as an American by crown sparrow because all such birds are genetically programmed to react similarly to the same stimulus. There are billions of ways to be human. Generally, we are not genetically programmed to react in highly specific way to specific stimuli. So in here, some researchers are convinced that they can that the Washu, Coco, and other APs have learned language and use various non-oral systems to display linguistic competence. But at the same time, there are other researchers say that this conclusion isn't justified. They believe that the research design and conclusion of the APE language research are not valid. So now we move to another part, which is the phonological component that we just talked about the phonetic. I think we have known already what is phonetic. So phonetic is the study of sound. It is divided into three as acoustic phonetic, auditory phonetic, and articulatory phonetic. So when we talk about the phonetic, remember the phonetic here is we talk about the study of sound. So we have ingressive sound. So ingressive sound and the speech sound that produced by sucking air into mouth, and aggressive, and we also have another one which is egressive sound, which aggressive sound and the sound that produced by expelling air from the lungs. So the difference between um, ingressive sound and egressive sound. So ingressive sound is the sound that produced by sucking air into our mouths, and while the egressive sound is the sound that are produced by expelling air from the lung. Okay, so during speech, the brain regulates breathing by automatically creating pause at the grammatically convenient place in utterance, such as the end of the phrase, clause, or sentence. The articulatory phonetician segments speech into unit core phone. And even though a phone can be described in isolation, in actual speech, the ideal shape of the phone will vary due to its phonetic environment. Um, Speech sound are initiated by an airstream. The airstream can then be altered when the vocal folds it into the vibration. This results in a voice sound pattern. Vocal fold cause a lack of vibration and a voiceless sound. The airstream can flow through the oral cavity exclusively, creating an oral um, or the airstream can pass through the oral nasal cavity, resulting in a nasal sound. Okay, so when a speech sound is produced when the airstream is constricted to stop at the same place along its path before it escapes from the body called a consonant. So if you ask what is a consonant, so consonant is when the airstream is constricted or stopped at the same place along in its path before it escapes from the body. So the sound that are produced with no closure or obstruction of airstream, we call it vowel. And so here we talk about the consonant and vowel. And there are some consonants that are stop that come closer to the ideal definition of consonant than do other consonant. For instance, the liquid have both vowel-like and consonant-like characteristic. Differences in pitch, duration, and stress can affect the meaning of an utterance. In addition, people do not usually pronounce individual words in connected speech. Connected speech is continuous and the listener decodes the speech by knowing where words begin and by knowing the rules of packaging utterances. And we move to another part, which is the phonological component, but we talk about the phonology. So the phonology, as we learned at the first time already, that phonology is the study of sound system of the language. That is, what sound are in the language and what the rules are combining those sounds into larger unit. It can refer to the study of a sound system of all language, including universal rule sound of sound or We can pronounce one sound in different way. For example, we can pronounce the sound per in two ways. The first one is per, and the second one is f. Okay, a phoneme is passive unit of language that signal a difference in meaning when contrasted to another phoneme. We can produce the T sound, T sound in the following way. For example, T, 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 and something like this. So different physical sound or sounds of the same language may be perceived as the same different phoneme. Minimal pairs and set are utterance in which there are the same number of sound segments. There's only one phonetic difference. This difference occur at the same place in the form, and there is the difference in meaning. The linguist corpus can use the corpus to discover regularity in the language. One way of doing this is by finding minimal pairs and minimal set. A minimal pair is made up of two forms such as word, phrases, and sentences, and that contain the same number of sound segment display. Only one phonetic difference that occur at the same place in the form and differ in meaning. Phoneme can be seen as the result of simultaneously produced feature, and the number and nature of these distinctive features is debated issue. Phonology is the study of the rule governing the combination of the phoneme as well as the investigation of how phoneme function in language. Obligatory phonological processes usually involve alteration in one phonetic segment, whereas optional processes can be much more complicated. Linguistics use a number of notional conventions to display linguistic rules. This notional system make it easier to write rule and see the pattern. This is about the morphological component. So morphology. So what is morphology? Morphology is the study of the structure and classification of words and the unit that make up words. So the basic unit of morphology is morpheme, and of which there are two main types, which is bound or free. We call it bound morpheme or free morpheme. So bound morpheme can be derivational or inflectional. In morphological typology is the study and classification of language based on how morpheme create words. So in synthetic language, bound morpheme are attached to the root morpheme to change meaning of the mark, change meaning or grammatical function. There are three kinds of synthetic language type were discussed: inflectional, agglutinating, and polysynthetic. So an inflectional language is one type of synthetic language in which one bound morpheme may convey several bits of information. And then we have an agglutinating language, which is a type of synthetic language in which each bound morpheme adds only one specific meaning to the root morpheme. We also have the last one, which is about a polysynthetic language, which is a synthetic language in which each word is equivalent to a whole sentence in other language. So morpheme may have different phoneme shape, but the phoneme shape that is used depends on the sound characteristic of the morpheme being combined. And because both morphology and phonology are involved in this subconscious decision, the study of them is called morphophonemic. Okay, so a new word constantly entering language is this process of compounding, blending, acronym formation, foreign word borrowing, clipping, derivation, like formation, using proper name and using trade name, and as some of the more common way that new words are formed. So it means that new words are formed by compounding, blending, acronym formation, foreign word borrowing, clipping, derivation, so on. So word can be divided into type and subtype depending on their meaning, how they function in a sentence, how they are inflected, and other criteria. So one system of doing this, dividing word into the lexical categories, noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. So these are the um, word class. Okay, so in English language, in one language, we have noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection. So next, it is about syntax. So the word syntax is derived from the Greek elements syn, meaning together, and text which mean arranging. So a level of grammar that specifically is refer to the arrangement of words and phoneme and morpheme, the lexicon. In the construction of structure such as phrases, clauses, and sentence is called syntax. So a sentence begins as a mentor construction job. Sentences are not randomly combined morpheme, but structured based on the basis rule of a combination. So there are four types of sentence, such as simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and compound complex sentence that we have learned already. So in 1950, Noam Chomsky revolutionized the study of syntax with his concept of a transformational generative grammar. This idea states that before we speak, we have formulated the idea of what we are going to say. And in 1995, he published the Minimalist Program, in which he made additional changes to his previous hypothesis about language, including dropping the concept of deep and surface structure. Fluent speakers of language possess a linguistic competence that usually let them make a grammatical judgment about whether or not the rule of the language are being followed when a person is speaking to them. This is how we detect a person as being a foreign speaker. Sometimes foreign speaker will not use a complete sentence. They may leave out a verb or a preposition, for instance. In this case, they are often using a second language combined with the grammar of their first native language. They may also use the word, the wrong verb, or the because what other differ in different language. They may not understand idiom or why something that I said in ambiguous. Next, we talk about semantic and pragmatic. So semantic is the study of the meaning of linguistic expression, such as morpheme, word, phrase, clauses, and sentences. There are two general types of semantic. Lexical semantic deal with meaning of word, and structural semantic deal with the meaning of utterance larger than word. So the two types of semantic is lexical semantic and structural semantic. So what words that are similar to each other in meaning or in sound are hypernym, synonym, homonym, and antonym. So hypernym are the words that form a subclass of another word. Words that have similar meaning that share the same semantic property are called synonym. And synonym have the same denotation, a dictionary definition, but different connotation or shade of meaning. Polysemous words have more than one meaning. So as you know, we heard the word poly mean that a lot, right? So words that have the opposite meaning are called antonym, and which can be classified as content, for complementary pair, gradable pairs, and relational opposites. Talking about pragmatic, so pragmatic is the study of the interaction of context and meaning. Look at the practical use of language. So by using a particular word or phrase, speakers give an utterance, social meaning, um, which tell more about themselves than about the referent. They can also give a natural and effective meaning which convey their emotion or attitude. Speech act their performative sentence in which the speaker is using the force of language to perform an action and not merely conveying information by speaking the sentence. One of the subfields of pragmatic is discourse analysis. So the process of discovering and writing a rule of discourse is called a communication event. So discourse analysis also includes study of maxims of a conversation, the cultural expectation that guide people when they are conversing based on the corporate principle. Some of the maxims of conversation in English are quantity, quality, relevant, and manner. Here is about the social linguistic and linguistic anthropology. So social linguistic is the study of how language and social factors such as ethnicity or social class, age, gender, and education level are related. So linguistic and anthropology is a branch of anthropology that focuses on, among the things, how language influence through their experiences. Standard American SAA is the variety of American English used in business, education, and media, and BBC English is the prestige variety of British English, so-called because the British Broadcasting Corporation uses it. In African American English, AA is one of the terms for the variety of English spoken in different parts of the United States by African American. It is important part of African American culture, heritage, and communal value. So African Americans switch back and forth between SAE and AE as the circumstances require. This practice of changing from one style of language to another is called code switching. The character of AE have The characteristic of AE have often been misunderstood as incorrect English. However, it is rule governed following its distinct phonological rule that include a rule of R and I and R deletion of final consonant deletion, rule phonophthongization, and modification of interdental fricative. Many of differences between SAE and AAE are grammatical features that include verb deletion, verb aspect, the word order of indirect question, multiple negation, and the existential one facet of African culture that have been preserved in African American culture is respect and admiration for a man of birth. The English spoken by American of Hispanic descent display a lot of variation. There are many variety of Hispanic English, AG. Hispanic English is a general term to describe the many variety of English spoken by American of Hispanic descent. Other characteristics such as double negotiation come from the grammar rule of Spanish. Another interesting synthetic practice of the bilingual Hispanic American community is the use of Spanish inflection morpheme with the English word. So next it is about the language acquisition. So a baby first word are not words, but they are sentences. So when 12-month-old baby say cat, it is a sentence that might mean that there is a cat, or I want to pet the cat, or keep that cat away from me. So with one word, with one short word like cat, one syllable word like cat, a child may have three different meaning. For example, like there is a cat, or I want to pet the cat, or keep the cat away from me. These children of the parent acquire sign language in much the same way as children learning spoken language. Going through the same stage, hearing children of this parent learn both the sign language of their parent and spoken language of the community around them. Children acquire more than one language as a result of either simultaneous um, simultaneous bilingualism, where the child acquires two or more language from birth, or sequential bilingualism, where the child acquires second language after having begun um, to acquire the first language. So the simultaneous bilingualism, it is when the child acquires two or more language from birth, and another one it is sequential bilingualism is when the child acquires a second language after having begun to acquire the first language. So there are two main hypotheses that propose how children acquire and possess two or more language, the unitary system hypothesis and separate system hypothesis. Sign language. Language is a mental potential that involves among the features, a lexicon vocabulary, and rules of combined lexical items, which is about a grammar. A speech is one delivery system for language, but the auditory vocal method of delivery is not the only channel on which linguistic information can be carried and received. Language can also be conveyed through the manual visual channel by the use of sign language or writing. The average American may know about 100 hand or body signal that convey dictionary type meanings such as the hand signs and used to signal OK. People who sign in one language are more adept at making themselves understood to signal of another sign language than are people using different oral languages. So when people speaking different oral languages want to communicate, they may turn to gesture. So speech is one way to convey linguistic competence. Signing is another. Second, the drive to communicate linguistically is exceedingly strong. The human faculty for a language is the consequence of anatomical and neurological specialization that arose in the course of hominin evolution. So science, the faculty is not depend on either speech or hearing. Sign language structure is based on variation in several parameters. This include hand shape, location of the sign, movement of the sign, palm orientation, and the region of the hand that contact to the body, orientation of hand with respect to the edge, other non-manual signal. ASL and all science language have a phonological, morphological, and syntactic rule because the study of ASL is shedding new light on almost all areas of research dealing with the nature of human communication. So my presentation comes to the end. Thank you, teacher, for your attention. Thank you so much.